think the idea of this session was that we were going to just kind of talk about, I guess I did suggest it, so I need to stay. I think we were trying to see how things were, I hope people can see this. Like maybe follow on from yesterday's panel, but also come up with some other ideas that might, that we maybe didn't have a chance to talk about in that panel. Sorry, the one on networks.
Just making sure we're in the right room.
Oh, you're in there. I'm like, don't you know? And I want to say that although it was a panel I was heavily involved with putting together, I was running around a lot, so I probably missed some really good stuff, but I heard from everybody that everybody thought it was great. So I just reiterate that part. And I think that a lot of the discussions, I think there was a lot of good back and forth. And so maybe what I'll do, I'll put a few people on the spot that were actually on the panel. Adam's here, Tim's here, Vladimir's online, and I think Carlos is coming back. So maybe to start the discussion a little bit about where they felt it was going from there. Hi, Vladimir. Where they thought they was going and kind of next steps. And I know that Jacob had some ideas also about collaboration with other networks. So I want to leave that open to everyone. So from those that were actually in the discussion yesterday, maybe even just like what's like the takeaway that y'all had, because we didn't really have as much time to talk about that for yourselves or for your campuses or for the system in general. I think I asked a lot of different questions, so you have a lot to work with. I know my takeaway was that I felt like it was really positive, that I know Scott walked away going, wow, you guys really all like working together and it seems like it's going well. I'm all like, yeah, it's been a lot of fun actually. It's been a really nice group of people to work with. So that was, I think that came out a lot, and that there was actually real interest on the campus, at least within the core group, to figure out something that works for everybody. So I thought that was positive. Knowing Scott a little bit, I think I could see the gears turning a bit in the head, like how is this, like what's the next steps for him to how to help out. So that's probably something to follow up on. And also
has he said anything?
No, not yet. I mean, I think he walked out. He had to leave soon after, but like I said, it's more like I was thinking. I could tell he had a lot to think about. Like we had briefed him a little bit over the time, but not really. That was a lot of information for him, more than I think that he had really realized things were as mature as they were. Even though we're still growing and figuring things out, that was still, I think, a lot further than he thought. So I think that was a good output for me. And then also so Josh was on the call for the Sloan Foundation, and he also gave very positive feedback. Really not a huge amount of detail, but kind of like, yeah, I think that was really great discussion. It was a lot to, for him. So he got out of him probably, even though he wasn't able to be here in person in the end. I think that was definitely a helpful part of that. So anybody else want to come in with what their feelings were?
Yeah, I mean, I thought that it was surprising that we all kind of felt this model where we have a central office and we all do our thing was acceptable. And, I was, it felt a bit romantic in that we all want to work on this together. Yeah. So it was a good feedback in that sense. And we were all kind of in agreement. One would say something and the other ones would, either repeat it or say that's a good point. So I'm optimistic.
Yeah, definitely. Anybody else can chime in?
I thought the good vibes were there too. And I was kind of trying to figure out the level of abstraction of where we work, because I do a lot of really hands-on stuff. And so I think there was like, okay, do we work on these like high impact? Do we help people like that are just getting started to learn how to do this stuff? How do we impact practices on our campus? And another thing I remember, I think you brought up, there's European group that you choose 3 things you do across hospitals, like trade code, see if they run, and I can't remember the other 2, but I thought there's like something like really small number of band things we can do that actually we do.
I would suggest one of them is something to keep that positive culture going.
Yeah.
Is that's one of the things you want to do together is with intentionality, work on that.
That's cool.
Yeah, and not just with intentionality, but actually measure it.
Yeah.
Actually quantify. Like if your goal is to do cross-industry open source collaboration, if that's one of the tenets that you set, measure it. Like how many projects did we do that crossed the UC systems? How many interactions did we have through the OSPO that were not just from one institute? And then measure that and then hold that up and say, well, this is how we know that we've accomplished that. Because it's very easy to write these aspirational things that are difficult to measure, but framing them in a way that you can measure them is very key to success.
I'm happy to go through what they've done just as something that then you can analyze and then see if it works or doesn't work. To my knowledge, there are currently 4, and this will be the 5th OSPO network in the world. The first one is the To-Do group from the Linux Foundation. And we have the OSPO Alliance from the OW2, Eclipse, and others. In general, I consider those the industry OSPO networks, Coke and Pepsi. Then you have OSPO++, which is international in everything but industry. And then you have the European Commission OSPO network. I will talk about the European Commission OSPO network because that is a most formalized of the structures that is outside industry. It is 12 European governments, mostly nation state plus cities. They have gotten together and they meet 3 times a year in person. Other than that, they meet once a month in a Zoom call. They've adopted a minimum viable governance structure and so that is one city is heading it and the European Commission. So it's the head of the European Commission OSPO plus the city of Paris OSPO. Those 2 directors, and then but that's also just because those 2 individuals are well liked and they're the natural leaders of the group. When the group first met on February 2nd in Brussels, we mapped out on the big board, like here's all the stuff we want to do together and versus resources we can do together. And we picked 3 things based on that, what resources versus time versus impact, etc. There's the realization that building your own individual OSPOs are going to take time. To allow that to happen at your own pace, to not rush it, to get it right, but at the same time to not wait to allow for collaboration, to start the collaboration process very early from the beginning and set that culture of collaboration between the nodes from that very beginning. So that's why there's an intentionality for the network. The 3 things that came up, and now we have 4. First is take one member's initiative and try to help them use that at multiple different of the nodes. It's a common thing. I've got something that I want other people to use. That's one of the patterns we've seen. So getting that done on a code project basis takes time, a lot of time. It was seen as simpler to take something that's called Blue Hats, which is kind of like the Code for America type of thing, but it's Code for France kind of thing. It is workshops, classes, and internships for public administrations. So they've got 2,000 public administration employees in a network, in a group, and they hold these events. Can we take this very successful Blue Hat, everyone gets a Blue Hat when they attend one of the sessions, can we take that event and then have each one of the member nations kind of run their own hackathon and put it under the Blue Hats label? They're already running hackathons anyways. So just show you've done something, you can demonstrate, and I can check a box. We all collaborated on this. I've got 6 hackathons done, all under the Blue Hats name. That was an accomplishment of the European Commission OSPO network. Second one is the idea of code swap, which was the idea that we want to help each other out with intentionality, but how can I put resources from one unit to, how can France put its own resources to help out Germany? we need to have Germany now putting resources to help out France, otherwise it's imbalanced. And you like, that's not, it's hard to justify in your internal orgs, why am I spending time on someone else's stuff sort of thing if we're not kind of collaborating. So it was, we're running workshops to say, I've got code here that I would like you to use, you've got code here that you'd like to use, let's actually, with intentionality, I'll get yours stood up, you get mine stood up. There has to be a business case and a reason, but we aim for this swapping to occur. It's a program that also aligns to a mission goal of the European Commission, which is to get cross-border solutions working. Then the third one is the idea that the OSPO itself is an organizational construct or not just doing open source. It is an API to the rest of the entire organization. So the OSPOs themselves would looking at, we would like to explore doing workforce development together. Not that the OSPOs themselves are going to be doing the workforce development, but each one of the countries has workforce development efforts. Can the OSPOs be the conveners that get those individual, like other parts, each university has workforce development in your own area. Can you use the OSPOs to help coordinate, and the OSPOs then become a collaboration infrastructure between the UCs, a new form of collaboration infrastructure between them. That's what they're doing there. You don't know if those patterns hold for what you're looking to do, not looking to do, et cetera, but I throw that out there as an example.
Thank you. That's very valuable, actually. Good to know.
I think what I saw yesterday that I think carried the most weight with me was just our commitment to collective action. This is not individual institutions agreeing on a data format or agreeing on some protocol under which we will manage our own individual efforts. Like this, I think this is first and foremost, does it become a collective effort? And I think that's what would enable those sorts of the resource swapping you were describing. I mean, that takes trust, but once you have that trust, it's a lot easier to just have two managers nod their heads and say, yeah, you can work on that, you can work on that, than figure out how to do cross-border. You know, I mean, probably easier in Europe, but anyway, it's not, you don't, it's within the university that's hard to get formal title to somebody's time. But we don't need that if there's trust. I think that trust comes from the community building we're describing.
I also like that it was, I think one thing that I've noticed in our discussions, just our private discussions that we've had since since the winter, with that there's a lot of interdisciplinary discussion with that, but then you were talking about kind of the trust is there too. And I think that's kind of weird in an academic setting. And also I always joke that the UCs are gonna I always describe it like having sibling rivalries, but I feel like at the same time, okay, it helps that I went to UCSD. I work at UCSD, so I get, but LA, and we're not even gonna start with Cal, but then so I feel like that what I've also really thought was great is that it's kind of similar, like you said, there's a level of trust, there's a level also of understanding that we're all leveraging each other's strengths, and to make us all as a system go further. And I think that that's been at least, and I think it's actually good that we don't have everybody on. I mean, to start out with, because I think the group that we have is like-minded enough to show that it's a possibility that this can happen with half the universities. So there's the feeling that it can scale up without too much conflict, I think or too much whatever can happen between the siblings, I think is actually, I think really good. And I really felt that at that meeting. It's like, wasn't like we're all the same mind, but we all have, like you were saying, it's like everybody kind of agreeing, like, yeah, that's something cool. And it's not that I assume that we're going to do everything that San Diego is going to do, but we're going to learn from everything you're doing and building up from that. And that's been really, I think that for me, particularly helpful to watch, and bringing in like different actors from each university has a kind of like very similar people, but then every so often there's like, oh, I wouldn't have thought that, like, that's a really great stakeholder that I wouldn't have thought of within our university to bring in. So I think that that's been really, really cool. I think that was really nice. I think it really just was highlighted in that session. Like I knew it, but it was really nice to have everybody else see it at the same time like yesterday. So
I think in
Yeah,
terms of steps,
Yeah.
how do we maintain it?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Victor. you were gonna say.
well, I wanted to say, yeah, Stephanie, you're absolutely right that a smaller group may be a better thing to start us with, and and then bring in the others if necessary. But that's one thing we haven't addressed yet. What is the mechanism by which we will be pulling in others? How will we recruit them? How will we retain the ones that are in there? I think we should, think about that and write about some efforts towards that.
I mean, there is a discussion about where does UCOP in? Is that how UCOP comes in? Like we get this initial like support from outside, but then when other universities are coming in, then it's like, okay, is that the way they match? To show if we are able to bring some in, it's because it is only a benefit to the system. And I think Scott was a little bit like, well, like a little like I didn't feel like there was oh yes, this is something UCOP can do, but it was, I think, a discussion at the beginning of a discussion of what the potential might be from UCOP or from, I don't know, like some sort of, or is it from the campuses themselves? That's where the support has to come from to help the other university, the individual, the campuses outside of us. They want to join it. Maybe that's have to come from, they're going to have to find their own resources, but we're there to help to support them. So it's not going to be like, oh, you have to start from zero. You have these things that we will help you with, and so you just have to add on to that. So that might be one approach. I think that's definitely something that is our next steps and our next discussions as we're moving forward. I'm sure there's a lot of ideas out there about ways of doing that too.
Well, we have to help UCOP realize this that this is an investment, and we have to shoot with kind of paint a picture of there can be some money in there. If this is a sustained thing that we can train corporations, we can train within and outside of UC, and we can provide IP within and outside of UC, and this could incentivize UCOP to actually not just allow us to do this, but also support us in doing this financially and in other ways, or in kind. That would be even better.
No, I think, and I think that's, I mean, I guess another one is like looking for options for that like existing UCOP support. I mean, we did, we're nowhere near mature enough yet, I feel like, but we tried the MERPI process, and Ned LeBon's on the call, so he went through that with us. So, and I think but I don't think we were quite there yet when like it was not even our group. It was like pre us getting all together, and we had a different group of folks. But so I know that there are every so often mechanisms that like standard mechanisms that UCOP has that we could potentially tap. And the idea of those is to create sustainable multi-year kind of, it's not meant to be like a one-off thing. The idea is, I felt, at least like with the MERPI funding, was to be like more of a sustained collaboration between campuses. And for the MERPI is the it's like a multi-campus thing. UCOP paying basically multiple campuses to work together on specific research initiatives. I think that's like multi-campus research initiative or something. And so, but like something like that is something we can keep an eye on, aside from just, I think, reaching specifically out to specific parts of UCOP and saying, hey, this, like you're saying, this is something that's valuable to them, and they should be it is an investment. And I think other universities are also pointing to some of the new universities and the new OSPOs that are out there. A good number of them, of the 12, have some sort of cost sharing, some sort of like the OR or something along the lines is bearing the burden, like half of it, or something where they're actually, they're not just using Sloan money, there is internal resources that are also being used. And that's also probably a very good thing to point to. It's like, these universities are taking it seriously for a good reason. It also seems like, and maybe other folks who are here can, I want to talk about Helios as well, because UC is part of Helios, the Higher Education Learning Initiative on Open Scholarship. I finally got that right. I was like, whoa. So please don't tell me I got it wrong. And I was, and it's this guy from CDL, the head of CD, Gunther, thank you. So Gunther is the lead person on that. And I'm wondering if that's another person we should bring. I mean, we haven't really brought like CDL into the conversation. We have UCOP a little bit, but CDL, and then also Teresa Maldonado, who is Scott's boss, was also part of the contact group for Helios. So those are also people I think that those are the folks that I think would be able to show us help us see where UCOP, where the areas of support are, or where areas to get support from. So, I mean, and I think a few people, like some from our group know Gunther and definitely know CDL more than I do, because that's not a group I work with too much. But, so, I mean, does that make sense? I was just hoping people who have more knowledge of that group. And CDL is the California Digital Library, Digital and Data Library. Digital, thank you. See, I wanted to know. And I learned that at CNI. See, that's a really good reason I went to CNI last year. So
your acronyms down.
I know, right? But yeah, so I'm not sure if there's something within like CDL that's use or Eric.
Hey everybody, and sorry I can't be there in person. I mean, I think it'd be great to engage Gunter in a conversation. CDL, they do a lot of open source software on their own, but I don't know that they would see an OSPO as the right home for them. But he certainly understands the Office of the President dynamics. And
I think it's kind of more that, not so much as, it's not seeing them as like but more as like a collaborating body that would make a lot of sense for us to work with. And yeah, like you said, like I would assume he would have a pretty good view. And just his role within Helios, I think sounds, it might be particularly interesting as he's the contact person specifically from UCOP. And there are some of the other universities, and I meant to get that list, and I'm sorry, I've been meaning to share that list with our group, because there are some of the universities that are in our group, I think, also have Helios. And the Helios is typically like the chancellor or above, or like chancellor, vice chancellor, chancellors who are the contact folks with Helios, because it's the president, the university president's university chancellor level. And so I'm wondering if that's other too, so maybe we start in identifying who within different campuses are those linkages as well. Because I do think that I feel like Helios is kind of focused on things that are not in parallel, not exactly parallel, but close to it on what we're trying to do.
I know like Helios is doing a lot of awareness webinars right now. And so you could actually try to get like an OSPO awareness webinar under the Helios umbrella, just to elevate the conversation. That might be a useful strategy. I have not seen Helios generate anything that I could make use of yet.
Yeah, okay. That's feedback to have too.
Yeah. And just while I've got the mic, I think Van Williams would also be a good person to connect with, the CIO at UCOP, and just, I don't know if we've had a conversation with him yet about OSPO and all this stuff and where we're going, but just so he feels included in the conversation, and he may, who knows what will come out of that.
Yeah. Well, maybe this is part of what our internal next meeting is about, like identifying all the people that we all think should be in the next, like in iterations of different discussions, or even like little working groups that form that those people get invited to have these discussions kind of more focused. Because I mean, there are obviously people that are going to be hard to get on a calendar slot on. Maybe we could get a focused conversation for each individual just to do that, especially if there's people that like individuals know better, like we know Scott, other people know Gunther, and it's like that, getting that whole dynamic going of we all seem to have the right contacts, so we just getting them together. Oh, hi Fazilla, how are you? All right.
Good, thanks.
So for anybody joining late,
Hi, Fazilla.
we are recording this, so we will be able to. So Carlos isn't that wrong on conference. I'm just gonna say, he's like, yeah, he's supposed to be here. I'll just let him know it's okay. Anybody, sorry. Any other thoughts? Or Priscilla, what was you just get joining, we're just talking about we did a little bit of a takeaways from yesterday's panel and then the kind of some next steps. Did you have any thoughts you had after, because you were in the audience for it?
Well, I thought it went really well, and I was encouraged by, I don't remember what was the facilitator's name, but he was a UCOP person who thought that they can back us up. So that I thought that was a win.
Yes. Any other comments?
I thought what Jacob shared was really interesting about just it was the European
Commission Open Source Network.
Thank you. I just thought that the process that you shared was really interesting of everyone sort of contributing, like what are all of the possible things that like this sort of collaboration could enable, and what are the things that we would like to get out of it, and then kind of throwing everything out there, and then as a group having a discussion about like, okay, well, which ones are we gonna like really try and like make movement on, or even picking like short-term, long-term stuff. Like
sticky things,
Yeah.
write stickies up on the board, go move them around, and then at the end of the
Yeah.
process, you get here's what we're gonna do.
I think that would be awesome, because I mean, I'm just like a postdoc, so I'm like I arrived. Well, I feel like I like arrived to like the party like that Carlos and Stephanie had been like preparing. And I'm super glad to be here. And it's like but I think like yeah, I don't know, I think that there's like explaining to people like what is an academic OSPO, like nobody really like knows yet, which is like kind of exciting. It's like people ask like, are you doing compliance, or like, can I come talk to you if I want to open source my project? And like, I don't know. I'll talk to
We're still figuring
anybody.
that out.
Yeah.
Actually, the talk that I tried to give at the Texas Open Source Symposium that I got totally screwed up because my mic stopped working, was kind of the big, was supposed to be the big takeaway, was like, we're just a work in progress. We actually don't, not everybody seems to have a different view about what we want. Because it's like every institution is a little bit different. And I feel like even more than an industry, that the way the OSPOs are look different based on.
I'm gonna give you a caution.
Yeah.
What I would not want to see happen out of the UC system is a homogeneity of OSPOs.
Right. That's exactly it. I don't think we actually see that.
I would love to see a tight working relationship, cooperation, blah, 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 blah. And not even just blah, blah, but like that's real.
Yeah.
But there's a variety of different value propositions at different schools.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a variety of different value propositions, even outside, like they're being set up and initially funded through research software kind of lens sort of thing. But I look at the OSPO as a whole organization construct, not just for the library, not just for the whatever. So I'm very interested to see what comes out, but also have you leave room in your OSPOs so that the danger is once you set up an organizational construct and you give it a mission, it's very hard to then change that mission once it gets going. I would like for you to go in with the idea that you are going to change your mission. You're going to add to your mission. What you start with will not be what you end up with. It will be, you're going to continue to add to that. And so as long as you go into with that thinking, that this is an evolving kind of startup, it's evolved like sort of thing, I think you're going to have amazing results. If you standardize them and get homogeneity, I think you're leaving a lot of value on the table.
I think it's right that I like your point, because I do think that like even with our experience here is that we had an idea of what we were doing when we started Cross, which was not an OSPO, which is still not an OSPO. But we have like a 5-year cycle type of thing. After about 5 years, we're like, yeah, that was great, but we got to do something else. Like there's something evolving that we need to meet with. Like we need to like keep up with. And it's not even just keep up because we always have to keep up, but it's more like, no, this is more interest this is even better than what we were doing, which we thought was awesome. So, but now we got to keep doing this. Thank you, Jacob, for pointing it all out to us back in the day, a couple of years back. And so I think that that's the interesting part too, because what I've found, at least since I've worked here, which is kind of, you know, UC is a really big, like sometimes stovepipe, sometimes, you know, or siloed, sometimes very bureaucratic, often always very bureaucratic. But what I also found since I've been here is that like centers change, like as a research center, we changed, we adapted. I think more than other, like what I expect other institutions to do. So I'm not sure if that's just we're lucky, but if other people see that's something where it's like, okay, we go through cycles and then we are able to change. Like we were able to kind of take put part of it here and then move on to a different.
At the CNI conference, if you watch the talk from the different OSPOs,
yeah,
one of the themes that they all say is this job of creating an OSPO is like a startup.
Yeah.
In the fact that we all thought we were going in with one thing and it keeps changing every 3 months what it is, and to accept that.
I'm a little worried about it.
To embrace that, to like run with that, because and I think the people there, that the other OSPOs and stuff, they like that part of it. It gives them excitement, it gives them job satisfaction, it gives them, you know.
Well, I also think it's funny that we were joking. I think, I don't really want anybody to go back to our original proposal and like compare to what we actually been doing. Not that we haven't been doing anything, but we're like, wow, we have this part not as interesting. Carlos pointed it out. We would never, under the original scenario, have hired Emily as a postdoc, and we were like, wow, that means our setup is wrong because she's perfect for this. And so we were, that was okay, cool. We weren't set in stone. We could adjust.
He tried to convince me to work on my open source hardware project, and I was like,
no,
that's not what I want to do.
But then it was like, okay, we can do that, you know. But I mean, you want to have standards. You don't want to be like, oh, too flippant about it. But at the same time, when you recognize it as something you've created that you think is important for structure is actually a barrier for moving forward on something, you know, you got to be able to recognize that. And I think that's part of what you're talking about, like being fluid.
You mentioned talking to the CIO of UConn. I think getting the CIO's input in this is very important, so that it's not just a research library kind of. There's a lot of different aspects to open source in the broad open source community. Open source means a lot of things to a lot of different people, and it's used in a lot of different ways. And I think that heterogeneity needs to be reflected in the organizational construct that you build.
Well, and I think it could be really neat. Somebody kind of brought this up yesterday, like the idea of different offices kind of like specializing in like different areas that leverage like their existing institutional expertise and who's involved, and like and then collaborations emerging from that, like where it makes sense. Like I'm also really interested in like the applied sort of work and getting people started, and like it would be, I think that everybody has this shared use context, which is so helpful. It's a very particular sort of institutions that we're working in. So yeah, I thought that was such a neat idea of, you know, that especially in the early part, like it would be so nice if somebody reached out to me and was like, oh, I really want to talk to somebody at a UC OSPO about licensing, and I could be like, oh, that's not my thing, but like, you know, there's somebody at the Davis OSPO is like, yeah, it's their jam. So yeah.
And to allow UCOP to give you permission to work that way.
Totally.
So that,
I
like,
would love that. I would love that.
So I'm wondering if the minimum viable OSPO at each of our campuses is a agreement by librarians and CIOs that there is an OSPO.
An OR.
Definitely. Yes, and others. I mean, there are probably others. Each of us would have a different set, but agreement at that level that there is an OSPO and it is part of this effort, and that we are charged with maintaining this community while we figure out what to do next. It seems like the deciding on even 2 of the 3 items that you mentioned, those are, I think the work is almost secondary to getting that buy-in and maintaining this momentum and the connections that we built. And then we can each go do other things. We can act as APIs to our campuses, but maybe we don't decide initially what we are all going to standardize on. We just keep the communication lines open And we can all hang a sign outside some door on our campus that says OSPO. And that at least gives people a place to turn to. Because like you said, we're not going to handle many of the things, many of the questions, handle directly many of the questions that come to us.
Like the different, like, oh, sorry.
Right, but we can direct people.
Right. I was gonna say, because in many, like in our situation, unlike in also like on industry, I don't want to be their person for like you don't want to be the licensing people here, because that's what our licensing people are for. We have them, they're in the legal team, and I rather talk, and I just rather more sure they're informed. And in our group, we're lucky because they are relatively, if they're not informed, they know they're not, or they know what they don't know kind of thing, and they know to go look for it. They're not going to be like, oh, we're going to handle like this, we handle everything. But and that's a relationship to have. But I agree. I think that it's nice to be able to like leverage what you're saying, leverage each other's like strength. But also I find, and this reminds me of my like time in my life when I was working more with compliance folks in export controls, totally different area. But it was one of the things that it would be across organizations, across, competitors. You work with each other because you know that working with each other is going to help you. And I think that aside from that, it's like a community of, it's like a community, what am I for? Community of interest. No, that's
Community practice.
community of practice. I should know what that, I've written in the notes. So community of practice. And I think that's of course kind of the start. We can formalize it more, but that's really what we can see ourselves as being. But then it like a more one that works together more than just, that's not totally informal, that it actually has a structure. So I like that idea of that, like
I'm going
times. Yep. So
I'm going to caution against assuming that other departments, units on campus know how to work with open source. It's a very different thing than what usually comes through their door. And so have a conversation before you start referring people to them,
yes,
because we might discover that we need to do education before we start doing referrals.
no, I think I'd say that's a really good point. I mean, I think it's like, I feel like we have a good relationship and that we've had those discussions already, but it may be a good one to set. Oh, that's also something that we can look at, like, oh, there are probably ORs, the Open Office of Research in different campuses who we've had where that conversation has happened, and so yeah, I know, knowing that one campus may actually have a good idea of how to work like this is a good start, though. Like I can say, oh, okay, well, we can have a conversation maybe between our group and then the group of all of the all the whatever the Office of Research folks, all the tech transfer people within the UC, and then have those conversations, or the other legal folks that have to deal with licensing at the different campuses. And each campus is different. I know that Davis is, like, this is one of the things that we've talked about. Our easy one is we don't have the IP issues. We have IP issues, but we don't have the patenting issues that we would say, like, that, we don't have that big of like a biotech or bioengineering portfolio. So those are the issues when it gets really complicated, when you're dealing with the open source, and maybe that isn't going to be easy. Whereas our group was actually very open about it because we had so many great successes with open source, whereas at other UCs have it a little bit more. So it may be more of a, like you said, you might want to feel like you have to train and talk to them a lot more. So, but I don't know how the other campuses, or what's UCSD like with regards to, or UCLA like. I think, I remember UCLA having a really good, not that long ago, a really good like seminar series, or at least a set of seminars on exactly on open source licensing. It wasn't
Probably.
it wasn't that long ago. I remember like, oh, okay, that's good to know they're having that conversation. So sorry, I was like, it was a couple years. I feel like it was during COVID because I remember it was all online. Everybody could access it.
Oh, that's
so
cool.
it was
Yeah.
cool. Yeah. So, any other? We have about 10 minutes left. So
We're gonna say connections to other networks.
yeah. Oh yeah. That's a good. I thought that actually was starting when I was out of the room earlier. So go for it. Yeah.
So I'd be interested in seeing how this California network, as you put together how you're going to work with amongst yourselves, how you're going to work externally, and what those connection points are. Like we were talking yesterday, Santa Cruz does not have the same challenges as the OSPO in Baltimore.
Right.
But I see connections with LA.
Right.
And I see connections with Oakland.
Mm.
In terms of the physical area, and then looking at applied open source to with community engagement, where we have the universities have community engagement mandates. They already have efforts. Can we leverage the OSPOs to help to coordinate amongst those efforts? Because
It might also be interesting because of what Baltimore has done in the universities, because you have worked more, there's like more of an overlap. with communities.
we're starting at different. It's more along the lines of what we're doing in Europe, which was in Europe, a lot of the OSPOs are started on the government side in terms of looking at digital transformation and constituents and stuff. So in what we created out of the UN event we did, we created the Baltimore Mid-Atlantic OSPO. It's nascent. It's like the Californian, we're still nascent, but it's got University of Maryland College Park, or sorry, University of Maryland Baltimore County. So and it's also got Morgan State University, and then multiple different departments from Johns Hopkins, because Johns Hopkins is a very distributed thing, as well as the city of Baltimore, and then some individuals, like some individuals from Microsoft, and like sort of that then becomes they don't play together at all. Like universities in general don't play together, but they're coming together, and I'm forcing them to come together to say, our common mission is Baltimore. You all have a policy priority to engage here. We can all trust, and we build a community around that as the policy thing that we can cooperate on. You can go fight and compete against each other on the other things, but on this one issue, drop your shit and come together, and that's where we're finding common ground. And so for us, that's comes looking like the Maryland OSPO or the Mid-Atlantic OSPO. And I would love to get the Mid-Atlantic OSPO working with the California OSPO or the California network.
I mean, because it's a desperate need. In LA, there's just all kinds of scholarship and outreach and connection from UCLA to LA municipalities, or it could be even like tracking what the LAPD does, and all this stuff is actually happening, but there's no that connection point isn't really happening. There's no sharing that is going on. It's all ad hoc.
I think earlier in this conversation, I beginning to discuss bringing in additional UCs, but it sounds like the scope could potentially be larger.
Yeah, I was gonna say I think because I mean, ultimately one of our missions is to better, the communities around us in all of California. So I think that it's in a similar way, it's supposed to be like, even though we compete for certain things, I think it's a similar way we're supposed to be ultimately, supposed to be bolstering the state as well as part of our mandate within these.
There's been a lot of efforts like with opening data at municipal levels.
Right.
That this seems like a natural connection to that. Like
we have open data weeks for cities and like the regional thing. We don't yet have open source weeks. No. What would it look like to have the California Open Source Week, and as a collaboration between the UCs, et cetera, to put on that as it's focused towards constituents, value proposition for California residents, et cetera, just as we've done with data in cities. Let's start that with, and to do it as a whole California thing in cooperation with the group. It becomes something you can do together. It stresses keeps your community muscle building, cooperation going. It's something tangible. It's an event.
Yeah, that's cool. Good idea.
And then I'll just say that the other option to collaborate, I would love to throw in the blue hats thing.
Oh yeah, did you?
So I mentioned that we did it, but that's a look to get.
We'll have to talk about color hats.
Really?
Yes.
Hi, the blue hats work. Blue and yellow
That's funny, that's-
works. Come on, sorry.
What color blue?
If there's an initiative that you all think to do that you would like to then export, I think it's also an opportunity to say, hey, we're all of the networks are trying to work on this low-hanging thing, which is, can we just all run some hackathons under the same name across all of the networks, just to say that there is a big global community and network, and that does exist, and we're at least attempting to cross-pollinate and coordinate. I don't want to be prescriptive on what you choose, but I'm offering that as really basic, low-hanging fruit as a simple get started way to connect to others.
Yeah, 'cause we do them already.
You do them already, so just add another name to, and you don't even change your regular name, just say the University of California, LA hackathon, part of the Blue Hats effort.
Right. Yeah. Any other comments from the folks?
You know, I like the idea of talking about MVPs and on, and I think it's probably time for us to start building a roadmap.
Mhm.
So lots of ideas in the air, some broader, some more concrete. I think it's time to start writing them down and organizing them.
Okay, I agree. I think that, and we talked a little bit about that, like the last couple days. I think we have sessions where we're meeting up, but I think I'll probably try and also take the transcripts or the videos from the 2 sessions we've had and trying to pull out the notes and just start exactly what you're saying, and like maybe put down like highlights and by the next time we maybe all meet together for the next iterations of what we're trying to do, have something down, obviously, with comments from everyone else. So
Stephanie, maybe if you can share that with me, and I'll try to throw together some kind of a Kanban board or something.
oh, that's a great idea. Yeah, I like that idea. Okay, great.
Yeah, I also wanted to just summarize from this session, right? What I got was 3 very useful things. One was the OSPO network discussion, and the second is that we should be focusing on a meta level to be able to provide service and conduit for the availability and capabilities at each of the campuses, but also the ability to connect the campuses through those for the the crossover availabilities. And finally, I think I like the fact that we're a training is going to be essential to this. That we can't just assume that we all will know everything, or that our customers will know everything, I guess.
Yeah, I definitely liked what Priscilla was saying was like, the different stakeholders at different campuses having different levels of understanding, and that kind of also helps lead to, I think, effective training, because you may be able to find, like I said, somebody in an OR somewhere in one of the campuses that it's easier for them to maybe speak to across to their counterparts than necessarily one of us to try and even within the same campus, and having discussions at that level. That we're on multiple campuses are but of the same folks, like the same OR, the ORs or all of the COIs or something like that, or CIOs, sorry. That would actually be, but then we maybe work together to figure out how to kind of package some useful, like a module of some sort that's helpful for those people that are champions in those different like parts of the different universities.
And since you're the point person with Josh, maybe we can find out, it would be very useful, what he expects to get from us. Is it a full proposal with a central piece and then little ones for each campus?
Mm.
It would be nice to know what structure he would like to see, maybe how long, 5 pages, 15 pages, there might be a difference.
Yeah, that'll be good to get that. Yeah, I'll definitely follow up, and I'll be sending a note out to everyone, because I think we need to follow up on the session, the meeting we had to cancel. So there's some more details on that.
Cool. Thank you so much.
Exactly what I want to get out of that discussion too. So, all right, we are at time. I'm actually gonna try and end this on time. One time in this whole symposium, we waited something on time and take a break. But that's great. Yeah, I'm sorry I wasn't able to take notes because I'm sorry I talked so much. But hopefully I will be, like I said, with this being recorded, I can get some.
Yeah, I took some notes. I can send them to you.
Oh yes, thank you very much. That'd be great. Thank you. All right, great. Well, thanks everybody. It been great. This really came out nice. I'm glad we had this extra time to talk to.
Great discussion. Thank you.
Great, thanks. Bye.
Everybody.
Stay